Thank you, one person that's listening to me.
Yes.
How many of you are facilitators, by the way? What is that trick where you're supposed to hear? You clap, and then the class is supposed to. How do you hear me clap?
But we're trained, we'll just ignore you.
I wish I could apply that to the comedy stage. Like, if you can hear me, clap once. Oh, see, that just feels weird to me. We're not in kindergarten. Sometimes we act like it, but we're not. Okay, so let's talk about this activity. Starting with the first moment of need, when the information is new. Tell me about your group discussions on what solution you felt might be the right one. Yes, please.
We thought it would be a blend.
Okay.
There's so many different types of information and different things to retain that you can't just do it all in classroom, all microlearning. We do think microlearning could fit into that, but it's just a piece of it.
Right. Okay. What else? Did anybody get anything different?
We talked about using microlearning as a way to introduce a new concept, like a teaser video, something like that. Very quick burst.
That's part of setting the stage, that schema, right? It's like, here's when you go to your instructor-led or your virtual instructor-led or whatever the next piece is, that video is setting the stage so your brain will know what you're going to learn and where to file it. So yeah, so in essence, blended. Did anybody get anything different than a blended solution?
Well, yeah, I think it kind of honing in on that, we talked about touching on the auditory, the listening skills and the kinesthetic all in one, where you're doing the facilitator-led, the microlearning, and the simulation-based, so that the employee's actually learning all pieces and parts of that.
What other thoughts? Yes.
Well, we talked about that the solution may differ based on how complex the
So if it's brand new information, if I'm new to the job, do you think that's going to be pretty complex? Pretty complex. But it could be that I'm just learning a new facet of my job, but then does that fall into the new moment of need, or does that fall into a change?
It could be either.
The change.
Change.
So, good. See, this is why I don't tell you everything, because you'll come up with it and then we can talk about it. So the new is typically, the primary characteristic of something new is that it is complex. You're like, well, why didn't you tell us that before? Because you can think for yourselves. The new is typically complex. It's, I'm starting a new job at a company. That's a lot of information to learn, right? So while the information pieces may not be that complex, all the information is a lot. All right? Nice. Nice. Yes.
We could push back a little bit on that. For us, at Blue Cross,
I'm a Marine, you know.
IT. In IT, we are always introducing lots of change in different fronts. And sometimes that change is bigger, and sometimes it's more targeted. Nonetheless, it's a change. And so depending on the scale of change, something new, it could be complex and it could be more simple, simple. So absolutely.
So that is the distinguishing factor between new and change. Change is a small piece of my job is changing. A small part of the system that I work on is changing. Otherwise, if it's a new system or we revamped the system, it now falls into the new bucket. That's the difference. That was general. Thanks. Okay. So why did you recommend that solution? I think I've heard it before already.
Cognitive load.
You guys had a lot of brainstorming, awesome brainstorming. Speak to me.
We chose instructional-led as far as the appropriate form of solution. Because some things new are complex, that you get some immediate feedback as well as opportunity to ask questions. So this new is complex, the interaction with group interaction with the instructor can give more answers and immediate feedback as opposed to CBT or maybe even microlearning.
Mhm.
So we chose that one as far as the agency.
And that's not incorrect. That is a perfectly appropriate solution. Now, why might your client or your organization push back on that?
Because of cost.
Resources,
Yeah, time and money.
time and money. I can't fly everybody to one location, but then you could say, well, how about we do, there's another virtual instructor. I hate webinar. Ugh, bad word. Virtual instructor led, so that way you can reach remote areas, but instructor led is perfectly appropriate. It is not, there are no necessarily wrong answers for this activity. Where you need to make sure you're focused on is the why. The why is almost more important than the solution itself. Because if your customer wants to go to all video-based learning, you have to be able to say, that is not the right solution, and here is why. And here's what I recommend, maybe to appease, right? We'll throw some videos in there, but we really feel like we need to bring people together so we have that immediate feedback. So I love the reason why you chose that solution. Perfect. All right, how about more? Doing the job, I know my job. You taught me that in the new moment of need. Now I need to know more because I want to get promoted, or I just want to know more about my job so I can just become an expert at it.
Yes, we said self-directed learning. So
What does that look like?
doing research, having an activity that you can kind of go through to learn more about it. Googling, YouTube. Give somebody a topic and say, find out more about this on your own.
What else? What other ideas do you have?
So there's also like assessments like for personality, different ways you can kind of garner to see where your knowledge base is to see where you need to grow. I think that's a good starting place to start there, because you think you want to do something until you realize how much you don't know, and then you learn. That's how it guides your learning into what you need to do.
So that pre and post test, like pre-test to see how much I know and I can skip this, or I take it and I fail it and I'm like, oh, maybe I should pay attention. Yeah, all right. Let's get to apply. What do you think the appropriate learning solution is there? Hands-on. And so what does that look like?
It depends on the content. In some cases, it might be a test or evaluation that's done. In some cases, it might be role playing or scenarios that are worked out in front of a group for critique.
Is it formal or informal?
Informal.
Could be both.
Probably informal. I mean, if it's depending on what it is, you might not want to be doing it live per se, where it really counts.
Right?
But I think when you get to apply, there is that piece of it, where they are going solo. So I think you'll incorporate that simulation perhaps, but then when do they test it out? So I think that's where we would want to see them apply a lot of that with like OJT. On the job training, maybe they're not by themselves, but they're going through the steps, they're going through the motions.
What sort of,
We also talked about maybe supplying a job aid that is on demand from the learner, so that when they are on the job and they're trying to apply their knowledge and they get stumped, then they can at a glance grab this piece of paper that gives them the steps.
So would that look more like job shadowing, job mentoring type learning solutions, to where, like you said, I know in the call center environment, which is one of my clients, they Y-jack up with someone who's really good at taking these calls, and they just listen for the first week. And then the second part of that is them doing it, but the person that was mentoring them is also listening to them, and then taking notes and giving them feedback, that sort of feedback loop. Very important, but now they have the pressure of the actual job on them, which is very different, because as awesome as we are as designing excellent learning experiences, nothing replaces doing it on the job when you have the customer in your ear. Yes.
I was also going to say, if you have the resources, especially for certain classes, you can do gamification within your class. to apply the learning in a more of a fun way, versus just trying to just say it all the time and on the job. They do it through challenging each other in the class.
Yes, that is also a way to simulate, to learn how to apply before it becomes really important. Excellent. Okay, so now let's talk about solve and change. We talked about change a little bit already, so let's focus on solve. Tell me about your discussions about that moment of need. First of all, were you clear on what that was? That was the hardest one. Okay, tell me
was
more
clear.
about that.
Because it depends on the issue you are having, it depends on what's going on in that particular situation. I mean, there's so many different variables, so I think that one was kind of hard to figure out. But you know, the best thing I think that we came up with was, you know, the peer-to-peer sort of medium, where a peer can help you solve problems.
So from a learning professional's perspective, where do you come in? Like with job shadowing and that OJT stuff, you can build out a learning map to say, hey, coach, here's how you coach this new person, right? You can give them some direction on how to do that. But when there's a problem and you're not there, where do we come in? What would we build to help with that?
Well, in our discussion, we kind of agreed that solve would be something very specific. We're solving a very specific, we're addressing very specific issues. So in that case, it might be a peer-based solution, or maybe like frequently asked questions, or some people might consider like a job aid or something of that sort. Because how we see it in the solve scenario, there's a question, but there's probably they're looking for one answer. Now that one answer might have multiple options. I think we talked about like, my table's wobbly, what kind of screwdriver do I use? We might have a few options, but there's still one answer.
Right. And a job aid, is that not microlearning? Yes, it is. Anything that is a small unit of information that I can learn from is considered microlearning. It does not have to be built-in articulate. Sorry, I love it. 360 is amazing, I'm just saying. But it does not have to be built in that to be microlearning. It could be a job aid, an infographic. It could be a small video of someone, you know, doing the steps and you're following along. That's what microlearning is. We had an excellent example in the room, which I personally could relate to. Solve is about something that you may not have known before. Maybe you missed it, right? We only can retain how many pieces of information?
7.
Yes. Well, that's one we remembered. That's good. I'm done. See you guys later. So maybe I missed that. That was the 8th piece of information that I missed. So I didn't learn it from new. I didn't know I needed to know more of it. But then, boom, problem comes up, and I'm like, oh. Huh. And the example was, your toilet breaks. You don't care about it, right? It works fine until it breaks. And then you Google, and you're like, how does this happen? Why does it keep running? And this may or may not have happened to me last month. And that's exactly what I did. I Googled it. I learned all about the inner workings of a toilet. I'm going to add that to my resume. If you need your ball thing, it's a technical term. If you need the floater adjusted, I know how to do it. Thanks to Google and a 2-minute video. So it was a problem that I had that I didn't know I had, and then I Googled, and then solved. So does that help with discerning the 5 moments of need? At the bottom of your worksheets are the resources that I pull from. Bob Mosher is a very good friend of mine, and he is the one he's like the performance support guru. He's amazing. He does speak at a lot of ATD conferences, but he talks about the last 3 moments of need, which is where microlearning is predominantly present, or should be. Small pieces of information. The first 2 moments of need are more formal, generally speaking. Doesn't mean microlearning can't complement them, right? But typically the first 2 are more formal. The last 3 is where the learning really, really happens and it gets pushed back into that long-term memory, that's where you need smaller pieces of information, job aids. Doesn't mean you're not going to do an instructor-led course for those things, but that's typically not going to be the solution there.
The learner does the learning themselves.
Because they know when they need it. Right? When they're brand new, they don't know. That's our job, to help them, right? Yes.
I just think this is more and more important as a baby boomer for millennials and younger learners because they've grown up learning this way. They Google everything and like I get a new iPhone and I'm looking for the manual that goes with it to read everything, but you're supposed to go online and just be able to ask the question and get it and everything. So I just think, you know, as we learn to teach, or as I learn to teach to the younger generation, this kind of approach is more and more important to use.
It
Does that
is.
make sense?
It does. So if you saw me get a little tense, we have a lot of myths in our world that I love to speak about all the time. And millennials learning differently is kind of a myth. Yeah, those are the resources. They don't have manuals because nobody prints them anymore. But if you give them one, they know how to read it and they know how to look up information just like everybody else does. And by the way, who wants to sit in an hour-long lecture? Raise your hand if that sounds awesome to you. Yeah, nobody does. So every chance I get, I try to dispel those gently because that is what holds us back from being true learner matter experts, is don't perpetuate the myths. And that's one of them. Millennials, yeah, that's what they have access to, but that doesn't mean they don't like to come in a classroom and share ideas and brainstorm. They love that just as much as Gen X, Y, baby boomers. Yes.
I was going to say, I agree with you, and I think we have to remember that I'm a technology girl.
I'll give you a hug.
I'm a technology girl. We got to remember as technology evolves, so does everything else. And what happens is we've evolved with technology as a culture, and so how we learn has evolved, how we approach things has evolved. Nobody carries around that heavy bag phone I used to have to carry around with my parents used to make me carry it because they thought it was too heavy. But, you know, think about all of that. It's about how culture is evolving. Nobody wants to use that old dial. Who does that anymore, that rolling phone? You don't do that. So it's a part of technology that's driving how we deal with our culture as a whole. And learning is a part of the effects of technology.
Well put.
So, thank you very much. And another one that was brought up earlier is that whole VAC attack. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. There's no research that backs that up. None. And so I think what's important about that is not to call it out and point fingers. What's important about it is I think that we try to find quick solutions to supplement good design and good training, whether it's microlearning, instructor-led, or not. And so I think we go to, well, millennials only learn this way, and you'll hear that from your customers. They only learn by videos, so just teach them videos. No, that's not true. And multitasking, there's a myriad of learning myths that we kind of fall prey to ourselves, and we have to be well educated on those things so that when our customers ask for them, we can say, here's why that's not the best. Microlearning is the newest shiny penny about that, right? Everybody wants to turn it into just quick learning bursts. My favorite word, learning bursts. All right, so let's talk about when you, we don't have the time, but I would love to really dive into this because we could like form groups and then come up with microlearning strategies together. Doesn't that sound like fun? So remember, this is more for the performance support or those last 3 moments of need. This is when you want to build a learning portfolio for your organization. It's multiple. It's not just one piece of instruction. Is that, get off, you're done. This is when you need to create a solution that is more performance support, which is comprised of a lot of microlearning. There are several characteristics or considerations that you need to think of when you embark on this journey with your organization, should you choose to. I recommend it. The first one is good old measurement. We should be measuring everything we do. That's how we sustain our jobs. That's how we know what we're doing is good. You cannot live, whether it's a 2-minute course or an hour course, you cannot demonstrate value without measurement. Still applies to microlearning. Now, the way you measure a microlearning strategy is a little bit different. How so?
You measure it in, not like say, number of times accessed,
Yes?
or the actual valuation of those that access it.
Yes. Yes, so it looks different, right? You're not necessarily able to tie it specifically to a business metric, but you know if people are accessing it, and then by and large, whatever that information is they're accessing, you see that change in the business, it's working. Even the likes and the dislikes. No, I love my likes, all right? So for Facebook friends, like my posts. But that's important. That's NPS. And as learning matter experts, we need to know that people are out there promoting the learning that we build. Right? Okay, so some ideas around that. Second, technology. Do you have the technology to support it? A standard traditional LMS is probably not your solution when you're talking about performance management. Why not?
It's not all CBTs. I mean,
So think about those moments of need, right? Do I have time to log on, whether it's single sign-on or not? Do I have time to log on to an LMS when I have a customer on the phone and I need to solve a problem real quick? I don't have time for that. I have to be able to get to the information quickly, which means I need some technology to support that. Whether it's your own YouTube channel, I understand this chapter has a YouTube channel. I'm stealing that, appropriating that idea. Going back to Charlotte with that little tidbit. Do you have that type of technology to support your performance management or microlearning strategy? Third, is it learner-centered? So I think a lot of times we are just like, oh yeah, I'll teach you how to build that. But there's no demand for that specific focused piece of instruction. So that's not learner-centered. Also, you need to build things that learners need to know. So how do you do that?
Ask the learners.
What their needs.
Yeah. What are the
Surveys.
biggest problems in your organization that can be solved with microlearning? Narrow the list down, prioritize the list, and that's where you start your focus on what you should build in terms of microlearning. Curation strategy, what does that mean?
You probably want to make sure the content that you're developing doesn't necessarily overlap, but that it does complement each other.
Yes, that is more about the next point, but that is also another consideration for microlearning. What does it mean to curate?
Only gather that which is relevant.
Mm-hmm. So you build this microlearning database, performance management database.
Searchable.
Make sure it's the right content, right? But then, is it accurate? Is it up to date? As things change. So you now serve as a librarian. Do I have the latest novels in this library? Mini novels. All right, a page of a novel. But do I have the right information in there? I have to pull it down when it's no longer valid. I have to put new stuff up. That's part of a microlearning strategy, and you have to think about that, because otherwise your performance management database will be obsolete before you even build it and launch it. So you have to make sure you think about that ahead of time. Who's going to do that, and how is that going to work? Accessible. So again, that kind of ties to the technology piece. Is it easily accessible on the job? Making sure I have the right technology that supports that accessibility. I think that's it. Oh, one more. Organization, I knew we'd get to it. So how do you organize your content? Just like Google, you have keywords It knows what to trigger, what videos to trigger. When you type in specific videos, specific keywords, and it'll pull it up. You have to think about that before you build it. How am I going to organize it? Am I going to have a systems bucket, and every little micro learning regarding your system that you use will go there? And then we're going to have soft skills bucket, handling objections and very specific objections that they might encounter on the job. Organize, organize, organize. You have to establish that structure up front. Then you build the pieces that go in it. So I'll end with a case study. For an organization that I worked with, we built a video-based learning program for them. Series of videos. We did organize it in such a way. We had systems, we had sales, we had soft skills, we had this, we had that. Then what we did is, because we wanted to drive accountability within the organization, establish a culture of learning. We've all heard that before, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, here's the mountain. I climb that sucker. So one of the ways that we thought to do that was, hey, I only have 5 designers on my team. We don't have the time to build, I think it ended up being 500 pieces of microlearning. Mm. So we're like, hey, but you know what? There are people in the business who know how to do these things. Mm-hmm. And we would help them, teach them a little bit about design and development. Not a lot, because I don't want them to take my job. Line? No. But enough that they felt like they were part of the team and part of learning, and they were helping the organization as a whole. When you feel like you're part of that organization and you contribute to it, you're more engaged. So it helps reduce retention, or increase retention. I think my brain's like, okay, it's noon. So it just has a lot of positive factors. But we told them, we put an RFP out to the organization. We targeted different groups, specific people. We identified like the best people who are excellent at different skills that we remember. We curated the information. So we said, we need people who are good at this. And the business said, well, Cheryl and Rob and whomever, they are so good at it. Like their numbers are off the charts. Great. What better person to put a 2-minute video together on this specific thing? And it was they built it. Then it would go through a process where it was reviewed by a subject matter expert to make sure it was right. We don't need to be spreading bad habits around. And then, after it passed that approval process, then it went up in the library. And so that's just an example of one way that you can deploy a performance management strategy. This one was video-based, so we just had them with their iPhones. Some of them look like Blair Witch Project. Not the best learning, so those got kicked back. But it was very effective, and we helped them, establish their curating plan. So how do you keep on track? You get to flag them, and every 6 months or a year, they would get flagged, and then you'd update them. All right, I'm talking too much. So I'll end with this. Just remember, whether it's microlearning, CBT, a web-based, whatever you want to call it, instructor-led, it is our job to serve our learners. They're our real customer, and what we build should have an impact on the behavior and success that they have in the organizations we serve. So be the Yoda. That's it. Thank you.